Today we're going to get to the bottom of some myths and honestly some downright lies about guitar wiring. And hopefully this will make your life easier as you work on your guitars. Now, we should say that everything I'm going to show you is science and physics and engineering that is accurate. So we're talking about facts here. We're not talking about feelings or beliefs. This is actually facts. That doesn't mean, though, that you can take what I'm telling you today and just throw it out the window and do whatever you want, because I'm going to do whatever I want too, and I'll show you that I really like some of the stuff that is basically just wrong. So let's get into it. These are 5 things that you're just being lied to about guitar wiring. First things first, let's talk wire. So this is a cloth-covered wire that is made by Gavit. And this is, if we just snip this off right here, and I'll show you. This is actually really, really good stuff. This is wax-covered cloth with pre-tinned wire inside. So this has actually been pre-tinned for soldering, and it is fantastic. Now, a lot of people will look into a less expensive guitar or a more modern guitar and see plastic PVC coated wire, and they will say, I need that vintage cloth stuff, just like this. And I say yes too, because it's pretty awesome. It works really well. Now, does that mean that it affects the tone at all, or is there any real good reason to have this cloth covered wire? Not really. It's not going to matter. PVC was just a technology that came into existence after cloth. Cloth was, it's been around since electricity was around, and that's what they put in walls and various things, and that's basically what this was. And then, of course, ABS and PVC came into play more after World War II, when they started using it in submarines and stuff, and so, to keep things more waterproof. So there's no electrical engineering reason to use PVC or cloth covered wire or that choice, so it doesn't really matter. You can use whatever you want. We use this Gavit cloth covered wire, like in this pre-wired Telecaster kit that we have on our website, and the reason I like it is because it holds its shape. So when you're doing wiring like this, you see how this wire kind of lays nice right here? Brianna made this the other day, and it's just, everything's really, really nice and clean. You can direct the wire where you want. Where PVC wire is kind of a little more unruly, and it just doesn't look as nice. So that's really the main reason why we use it. And when you're soldering it and you're using it, so instead of having to strip it, it's called pushback wire for a reason, because all you have to do is just push it back, and now you can solder it. And it works really well. And this stuff that we use, that we have on our website, like I said, is pre-tinned. So when you're soldering, it's just a lot faster and a lot more effective, a lot better solder joint quicker. It's awesome. So really, this cloth-covered wired stuff is not a tone thing. It's more of a convenience thing, and that's why we use it. There's probably a case to be said that PVC covered wire is actually better, but this is easier, and it looks nice, plus it just gives you that vintage feel. Next, let's talk about capacitors. So we get this question all the time. So we've got our capacitor soldered onto our tone pot here on our Telecaster control plate, and we've got one lead to the pot here, and we've got one lead that's grounded on the cap on the pot here. So the question then becomes, is polarity a thing? So does that mean, should we have it this way, or should we have it this way? Should the name be up? Should it be facing a certain way? Is there a polarity with an orange drop capacitor? So this has become a huge myth online, and the bottom line is there is no polarity with an orange drop cap. Basically, the way this is made is there is a foil on one end of it and a foil on the other end of it, and then it's rolled up, and then it is encapsulated, sort of impregnated with this polypropylene, and that is how it works. So most capacitors that are not electrolytic capacitors, so you know the big one that looks like a Coke can with the two wires coming out the bottom, and it'll have a negative and a positive, but that's because there is an electrolyte in there that makes it to where you have to have polarity. These do not have to be polarized, so you can put them on your guitar any way you want. You can face it this way, you can face it this way, it doesn't really matter. Now the next thing that comes up, because there's going to be a couple of people that have made videos in the past to talk about, and this is where the myth comes from, that the foil is grounded on one side and not grounded on the other, so therefore it will be quieter if you put it in one way versus the other, and that is summarily false. So basically, we're grounded anyway. The way the cap works in the guitar is it's grounded. So one side is grounded. It doesn't matter which side it is. And so there is no shielding benefit for having one side grounded over the other. Now, that doesn't mean that science is incorrect, okay? So that science does exist. The physics are there for this. However, they're really, this really comes into play in like other applications, right? So when we're talking about a radio transmitter front end, like that sort of thing, at very, very high frequencies, above what we can hear, and when you're tuning everything, when you're tuning the frequency to work a certain way, then everything needs to be paid attention to. But that's a completely different application. I always say that if if my iPhone is a smartphone, then this circuit is the dumbest circuit possible. Okay, it is a very, very, very simple circuit, and this physics to make a guitar work are very, very simple. And even though that whole shielding on one end of a capacitor in certain circumstances is a thing, it is not a thing in a guitar. It just doesn't matter. So that should make your life easier. Just put the capacitor in the guitar and you have no issues. While we are on the subject of capacitors, let's discuss 50s wiring versus modern wiring and which one is better, because a lot of people will vintagey sounding stuff automatically is purported to be better for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, I like vintage wire more, but honestly, I don't like vintage wiring more. So let's talk about the difference between vintage wiring and modern wiring, or 50s wiring and modern wiring, or 50s Gibson wiring and modern Fender wiring, which is what this is. So let's grab a diagram that I have printed to make this easier. So this is Gibson 50s wiring right here. And basically what we've got here is the cap is attached to the wiper of the pot. Okay? And basically what that means is, in the easiest sense of it, is that the load of the volume working is not directly on the signal of the pickup, meaning that the tone and the interaction of this capacitor is happening after the volume has already been adjusted, if that makes sense. And what that means then is you have less cutting of highs in this scenario. The 50s wiring thing is sort of a misnomer. They sort of changed it around. This is another way of doing it. This is what we think of when we think of modern wiring, where the capacitor is now actually hooked up to the input of the capacitor, the input of the volume pot, which is what I have over here. Now we've grounded it differently, But the bottom line is it is hooked up to right here. What that does, though, is that when you turn the volume down, the capacitor and the volume loads the pickup differently and then therefore cuts more highs. So that's the technical reason, but the net result is two things. One, you get more highs here. You get more highs cut off when you turn the volume down with this. You get less highs cut off when you turn the volume down with this. But it interacts with it differently. So I don't actually like it because, like on a Les Paul, for example, when you turn the volume down, both pickups will turn down instead of just one. I actually like this. And I also like this. We could do a whole video on this, but the other reason I like this is because a lot of times the clarity in the pickup changes the entire frequency response of the pickup as you turn the volume down, giving you a different effect. Especially in a single pickup guitar, I really, really like this, like in a Junior or an Esquire, for example. So you can get a whole bunch of different tones out of this, where this just gets thinner and quieter. So there's give and takes to both of them. Our pickups that we make here at DylanTalksTone have lots of clarity. And so I think they stand up very well to normal modern wiring without the downsides of 50s wiring. If you have a pickup that's very flat on top, like a Seymour Duncan JB or a Jazz, for example, then you might want to stick with 50s wiring. But if you want to stick with our stuff, you're going to have a lot more room to do what you want to do, and I really like the modern wiring better. All right, let's talk about solder. We use Kester 6040 rosin core solder. Now, there's a couple of myths surrounding solder that I want to address. One is, do you have to use flux to use solder? If you use the correct solder, you don't have to. And for those of you that don't live in the United States, like everywhere else, I actually live in the United States, and so we actually say solder. And I know many of you that don't live here say it differently, but this is where I live, and this is the language that I speak. So therefore, I'm going to say solder. If you have a problem with that, I don't know, skip this video, go to therapy. Anyway, just, yeah, deal with it. So, it's like the whole metric versus standard thing. I'm not a drug dealer, so ounces work for me. You know what I mean?
See, I'm the opposite on that.
You like grams?
I think there is no reason I should not understand what a recipe needs because it's in a different country that it came from.
Okay.
I do not want to take something out and remeasure it.
Okay, so you need to be able to measure it both ways?
I would like to. I do not understand why the United States is not on the metric system.
No, I agree. I think the metric system is better for most things.
Yes.
The thing is that there are certain things that I like better not in the metric system. Thousandths of an inch, for example. Millimeters are tougher. I would rather have thousandths of an inch, for example.
Fair.
Right?
That's
so when
fair.
we're doing string height, when we're measuring wire gauge, like what you're talking about, I care about that. But when it comes to like distances and like kilometers
Don't
and
tell me kilometers are nothing. Like
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't care if you switched over to that. That wouldn't matter to me. I would totally switch to the metric system. I like it.
care if I learned it.
Yeah, all you got to do is learn it.
But
No big deal. I have nothing against it.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
makes me hurt.
Yeah, but for now, grams, ounces. But I use grams for lots of stuff. But I'm just saying, I'm not going to convert it in every video for everybody. We all have ChatGPT and Google.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
Like, it pisses me off and I have to Google it, but also I don't expect the old woman who wrote the recipe from Germany to be like,
Oh,
"Here's-"
yeah.
I don't expect
Exactly.
somebody else to do it for me for my convenience.
Exactly, because we are not lazy. Okay, back on topic. That little side note. Hopefully people enjoy that. I'm leaving that in. So here is some solder for those of you that live in other countries. And this is 6040 Kester. And it is 6040 lead tin. Now, I like 6040. Some people will say, do you want to use 6337 because tone, bro, because better conductivity, etc. That's not the difference. The difference is the melting point. 6040 rosin core, 6040 solder has a bit of a variance in, I think it's like 100, and believe it or not, this is metric. It's like 160 Celsius to 100 and maybe 180 Celsius to 188 Celsius or something, where it's melted between those 2 points. I can't remember what the exact numbers are, but 6337, it melts at exactly that lower number, and that's the only place it melts. So you have less room to goof it up, basically. But if you know what you're doing and you know how to solder, this is easier, in my opinion, because it flows. 6337 flows quicker, but for not as long. And so I really like 6040. It's not going to be a tone thing. It's not going to be a conductivity thing. It's going to be a skill thing. So just decide which one you want to use. I like 6040. Technically, 6337 would be better, but 6040 is easier. Now, as far as rosin goes, there is more or less tree sap in the core of this. It's an acid, actually, in the core of this solder, so you don't need to use flux. If you flux, you're a plumber. If you use rosin core, you're a guitar enthusiast. It's really as simple as that. And if you use the right solder, you don't have to use flux. That's right. Unless you're trying to time travel, then you use a flux capacitor. I suppose that's true. Okay, let's talk. I mean, I'm rolling the whole time. We're just having fun here. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about is star grounding in a guitar. So some people will say that you have to have your ground like this, right? And then you've got your pot, and all the grounds for the whole guitar need to come to this one place in this particular shape. Or they might say you need to have like a common bus bar where everything is grounded to it and then it's hooked to the ground for it to be the least amount noisy. That is incorrect. That is actually false. In a guitar, we only have what we would call in the electronic engineering business one ground node, which means that there is only one ground potential in a guitar, and it all terminates at the output jack. So we don't have multiple grounds in a guitar. There's two things we don't have in a guitar, actually. We don't have multiple grounds. We have one. It's right here. The entire thing is grounded right here. The reason people want to go for this is because they want to say that there is a ground loop, meaning if we have a ground, like people think this is what it is, that if you have a ground and then your wire goes around in a circle like this, and you have a pot here and you have a pot here and you have a pot here and you have a pot here, like in a Les Paul, that you're going to have this ground loop and it's going to cause noise between these components. But that's not actually what a ground loop is. So a ground loop is when you have two differing currents. So first of all, you have to have current present in a guitar, which you do not. You might have 400, 500, 600 millivolts, right? And you might have 7K of resistance, but you don't have any current. So you have to have basically two different kinds of current, two different values of current, and then you have to have two different ground potentials, right? Which neither of those things are present in a guitar. We don't have two different sources of current, and we don't have two different ground potentials. We have one particular ground node, which is right here, and we have no current, which means it is impossible to have a ground loop in a passive electric guitar. I'm going to say that very slowly for everybody in the back. It is impossible to have a ground loop in a passive electric guitar. So where does this come from? In a amp, for example, in a guitar amp, you have a couple of different places. You have your power side, right, of your transformer, for example, and you have your power supply. Now, those are going to be two different current loads, right? And they need to both be grounded. But because they have two different current loads, and we're talking multiple amps here, like the kind of amps that could kill you. When I say amps, I mean amperes, like AMPERE, not amplifier, right? So we could have, I don't know, 12 amps, whatever, power amp and the power supply. They have two completely different current loads, right? Then they need to be grounded in a way that makes it to where they don't have noise. The other place we could have this is we could have our guitar here. We could have our pedal board here, which is grounded. We could have our amp here, which is grounded with two different current loads. We've got the current load of our pedal board, the current load of our guitar amp, and now we've got a ground loop that could happen because we have zero current here. We have some current here at our pedal board. We have more current here at our amplifier. And when we plug them all in, we could have a ground loop. So we need to make sure that we isolate one of those things. That's why we have a ground lift, for example, in that circuit to minimize noise. But within the guitar itself, even in that illustration, this is one ground node, which means that we cannot have a ground loop within this. We cannot have a ground loop in the guitar. Don't worry about it. It will make it way easier. The bottom line is this. Just ground all of your various components that need to be grounded. So your capacitor, your volume pot, your output jack, and your tone pot. That's it. You're done. Oh, and your pickups. So hopefully diving into this a little bit will help you keeping things a little bit more simple. You don't need to worry about a lot of this stuff. If you just stop worrying about all these various myths, it'll make wiring your guitar a lot easier, and you won't have to worry about it. The biggest things I would take away from this are make sure that your soldering is good, right? Doesn't matter what you use. Make sure that your soldering is good. Make sure that your connections are good, that you don't have cold solders. Make sure that you use whatever capacitor you want to use, make sure it's a good one. Make sure that the tolerance is good so that the value is correct and that it doesn't drift over time. Make sure that the wire is good enough to use. All those things are all that really matters. Again, we're not talking about high load stuff. We're not talking about high voltage stuff. We're not talking about ultra high frequency stuff here. So we don't need to worry about any of those things that most people make us worry about. Anyway, if you have questions about this stuff, get in the chat, get in the comments, ask about it, and we can help you out with it. If you need to buy any of this stuff, pickups, capacitors, wire, any of the things that we talked about today, everything that I showed you in this video, we have available at DylanTalksTone. You can scan that little thing right there and go get it for yourself. Try our pickups, whatever you want to do. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next video.